What if a simple act of love, a boy saving every coin to buy his mother a silver necklace, turned into a powerful lesson about kindness, prejudice, and the courage to stand up for what's right? Imagine Noah, a teenager living with Tourette's, facing ridicule and rejection in a high-end jewelry store, his heartfelt mission almost crushed by cold judgment. But what happens when a silent bystander steps forward? And that bystander is none other than Keanu Reeves. How does one moment of unexpected compassion change the course of Noah's day, his confidence, and the store's reputation forever? Dive into a story where courage meets kindness, and discover how the smallest acts can create the biggest ripples in the world. Before we continue this story, let us know where you are watching from. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. Noah woke before dawn, staring at his own reflection in a worn, cracked mirror that hung in the tiny bathroom. The early morning light cast soft shadows on the walls, and as he studied his features, he felt the first familiar signs of tension crawl across his shoulders. A stiff blink, then another, followed by an involuntary jerk of his neck. He shut his eyes, inhaling deeply to center himself. Today had to be perfect, he told himself. He had worked for months to gather enough money to buy a silver necklace for his mother, Emma. She deserved something beautiful, something to remind her that everything she did for him mattered. Stepping out into the hallway, Noah tucked a small wooden box into the pocket of his faded hoodie. Inside that box lay the collection of coins and crumpled bills he had saved, painstakingly gathered from spare change and small tips he'd earned carrying groceries for neighbors. It was all for Emma. She was the one who held his hand when his Tourette's felt unbearable, reassuring him that his tics didn't make him strange or unworthy. But no matter how often she comforted him, society's reaction could be cruel. Sometimes people rolled their eyes or laughed outright, certain he was making faces on purpose. He tried not to let their stares get to him. He found Emma in the kitchen. She wore her custodian's uniform, hair pinned back, face etched with early morning fatigue. Still, she managed a bright smile when she saw him. "You're up early, champ," she said softly, brushing her fingers through his hair. He smiled back, cheeks warming as another series of tics tugged at his facial muscles. She pretended not to notice, the way she always did. "Just heading downtown," Noah replied, forcing confidence into his voice. Emma eyed him with mild curiosity, but let it go, only urging him to eat breakfast. He nodded, feeling that little swell of guilt for sneaking out with his secret plan. The day was crisp, the sidewalks still damp from a shower the night before. The city was stirring, shops flipping signs from closed to open, and the aroma of fresh coffee drifted from a nearby cafe. Every step Noah took toward the jewelry store felt heavy with anticipation. A sharp blink, followed by a muffled grunt, signaled a wave of tics that refused to stay inside. An older woman paused in her tracks to stare, but he kept moving. He'd learned long ago he couldn't control every tic, no matter how hard he tried. Finally, he arrived at the small jewelry boutique. Through the glass, he glimpsed polished counters under soft lighting, and shiny bracelets and pendants arranged like treasures in a fairy tale. The store's sign, bright silver letters reading Stanton and Carter Jewelers, glowed with a certain elegance. With a final inhale, he pushed the door open. A delicate bell chimed, announcing his entrance. Behind the counter stood a woman with sleek blonde hair pinned in a neat twist. Her name tag read Sarah Stanton, and she wore an expression that balanced boredom with faint irritation. Noah offered a polite, if shaky, hello, his face contorted slightly with a blink he couldn't suppress. Sarah's gaze flicked over his hoodie, old sneakers, and the wooden box clutched in his hand. "Yes?" she asked crisply. Noah swallowed, determined not to let his voice tremble. I'd like to buy a silver necklace for my mom," he said. "I have money." A sharp vocal tic emerged at the end of his sentence, a soft grunt that forced its way out. Sarah pursed her lips, obviously taken aback. "Are you sure you're in the right store?" Noah felt the sting of her words. Still, he set the box on the counter. "I save," he managed to say. "I promise I can pay." He opened the box, showing the coins and small bills. Sarah glanced at them with outright disdain. Her lips curved in a mocking smile. She nudged the box away with a single finger, as though it disgusted her. "We don't really deal in loose coins," she said icily, voice dropping low. "This is a high-end establishment, kid. You might want to try somewhere else." Something about her tone, maybe the casual cruelty, made Noah's face flush. His shoulders twitched, and he tried to steady his breathing. But the frustration only fueled more tics, causing him to blink rapidly and jerk his neck. Sarah's eyes narrowed, and she tilted her head in obvious discomfort. "Is that supposed to be funny?" she asked, ignoring the flush on his cheeks. Heat seared Noah's face. "It's not. I can't help it," he whispered. A swirl of shame and anger coiled inside him. Yet Sarah seemed to find new amusement in his stammering. She leaned forward, whispering loud enough for him to hear, "We don't have time for silly acts. Just go." Before Noah could protest, the door chimed again. He barely registered the newcomer, someone in a dark coat, standing off to the side, quietly observing. All Noah wanted was a moment of decency from this store employee. But her next words made his stomach twist. "You're making people uncomfortable." She snapped. "Don't you think it's time you leave?" Noah clenched the box tighter, as if it could protect him. In that moment, he had no idea that the silent figure now inside the store was about to intervene. And that person was none other than Keanu Reeves, quietly watching every humiliating second unfold. Noah's breath caught in his throat. Sarah Stanton watched him with a mix of annoyance and curiosity, like he was an unwelcome distraction interrupting her otherwise polished day. A couple of other customers hovered near a glass display of rings, stealing glances at the commotion at the front counter. One of them, a middle-aged man, openly smirked when Noah's neck jerked again. "Does he have a condition? Or is this some joke?" the man murmured to no one in particular. His voice had a derisive edge, and a few people snickered. Noah's cheeks burned with shame, and the flood of tics surged once more. His fingers trembled, and a muted clicking sound escaped his throat. "Kid," Sarah said, exasperated, "if you can't keep it together, you need to go." She shot a cold glance at his box of coins. "We don't accept random change in a place like this." Noah felt an overwhelming urge to disappear. He had pictured this moment so many times. Stepping confidently into the store, politely asking for the necklace, paying for it with his hard-earned savings, and leaving triumphant. Never had he imagined open ridicule. But that was exactly what was happening. His chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. From behind him, a deep voice spoke, startling everyone. "I'm surprised you'd speak to a customer like that." The words were calm, yet there was a quiet authority underlying them. Sarah looked over Noah's shoulder, her dismissive smile faltering. Standing near the entrance, still partially in the shadows, was Keanu Reeves. He wore a long black coat and dark sunglasses, which he slowly removed. His gaze settled on Sarah, then flickered to Noah. Every eye in the store tracked him. The older man who'd been snickering went silent, and the woman next to him stepped back, uncertain. At first, Sarah seemed ready to snap out a retort. Yet her voice cracked when she realized who was talking. "And Mr. Reeves?" she managed. Greg Carter, the store manager, suddenly appeared from the back room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a tailored suit that screamed corporate precision. Sarah darted around the counter toward him, whispering frantically, "We've got a situation here." Greg's gaze bounced from Sarah's panicked face to Keanu Reeves, then to Noah, who stood there with trembling hands. "What's going on?" he demanded, though a hint of nerves now tinged his once confident tone. Sarah huffed. "This boy is causing a disturbance." And Mr. Reeves just walked in. Keanu raised a hand, cutting her off. "Disturbance?" he echoed quietly. "He's trying to buy a necklace, isn't he?" His tone was so direct that Sarah instinctively took a step back. "He's at a jar of coins," Greg chimed in, trying to regain control. "This is a high-end store, and we can't." "Can't what?" Keanu asked, stepping forward. His voice didn't rise in anger. It stayed calm, but carried a weight that made Greg squirm. Can't handle a paying customer who save his money because it's not the right kind of money for you? For a moment, no one dared to breathe. A handful of curious passers-by, noticing something unusual going on inside the store, lingered at the window. Through the glass, they saw Keanu Reeves confronting the store manager and a boy who looked like he'd just stumbled out of a nightmare. Noah clutched his wooden box, blinking rapidly as he tried to process what was unfolding. Greg forced a laugh. "That's not it, Mr. Reeves. This young man," he paused, glancing at Noah's spasms. "He's making some people uncomfortable, and we do have a reputation to uphold." At that, Keanu's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Ah, so your reputation is more important than basic decency? Interesting." The tension in his voice prompted the older man near the ring's display to quietly set down what he'd been examining an inch away, as if not wanting to be associated with Greg and Sarah's behavior. Sarah tried again, clearing her throat. "I think there's just been a misunderstanding. We were trying to explain that maybe this isn't the best store for him." Her gaze flicked dismissively over Noah's worn-out sneakers and cheap hoodie. "We sell items worth thousands of dollars. Coins and small bills aren't exactly." Keanu stepped closer to the counter. "You think a mother's gift should be denied because the money comes in smaller denominations? Since when is that acceptable?" He rested one hand protectively on Noah's shoulder, which trembled beneath his touch, though the boy looked more hopeful than before. Noah swallowed hard. He still felt the tics, but they faded to the background for just a moment as he looked up at Keanu Reeves, an actor he'd seen on TV and admired for his roles, but never imagined meeting in a million years. And here he was, stepping between him and these people who had laughed in his face. The manager's lips parted, but no words emerged. He glanced at Sarah, who remained silent, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Keanu turned his attention to Noah, leaning down to meet his eye level. "Don't let them make you feel less than," he said gently. Noah tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. After a pause, Keanu straightened and addressed Greg. "You said you have a reputation to maintain. I suggest you think carefully about what that reputation should be. Because from where I stand, humiliating a boy with Tourette's who wants to buy his mother a present isn't the kind of reputation worth keeping." Greg's face reddened. Sarah, standing behind him, whispered, "You do realize how this looks if anyone finds out?" She glanced warily at a young woman near the door who had her phone out, filming. Greg gulped. He seemed to calculate the potential damage in his head. Then, grimacing, he reached over the counter and pulled out a black velvet tray. What necklace did you want?" he asked, trying to salvage the situation. Noah hesitated, heart pounding. "A simple silver one," he murmured, blinking rapidly. "The one in the window with a small heart pendant." Greg nodded stiffly, stepping away to retrieve it. While he did so, Keanu quietly placed a reassuring hand on Noah's shoulder again. The boy's tics continued, but somehow the humiliation had receded, replaced by a spark of determination. After all, what mattered most was his mother's happiness, and that was something no amount of ridicule could steal. Greg Carter stood at the display case, keys jingling in his unsteady hand. Each movement felt oddly significant, watched by the silent crowd inside the store and possibly many more outside. He lifted the glass, extracted the silver heart pendant, and set it on a small velvet mat. "This is what you wanted," he mumbled, barely meeting Noah's gaze. Noah swallowed. His throat felt tight from the overwhelming surge of emotions, but he stepped forward. "Yes, sir," he said softly. He tried to extend his hand to touch the necklace. A forceful tic jerked his shoulder, almost knocking his hand sideways. He cringed, ready for more mocking laughter. But nobody laughed, at least not in that moment. Keanu Reeves stood beside him, projecting a calm presence that seemed to dampen anyone else's urge to sneer. The tension was still there, but it was undercut by an unspoken understanding that the store's staff had gone too far. Even the bystanders sensed it. Noah carefully placed his wooden box on the counter. One by one, he started pulling out coins and small bills, his cheeks flushing as he realized how it might look to these people. This high-end store, the fancy suits, and he was paying in loose change. Yet every coin represented personal sacrifice. Small tasks done to help neighbors, or the times he ate a simpler lunch so he could set aside an extra dollar. This was love in tangible form. Greg shot Sarah a helpless look. She returned it with a glare, as if to say, just do it. With no small amount of reluctance, Greg reached for the first handful of coins. The clinking sounds echoed as he slid them across the glass to count. The entire store watched the scene in near silence. Occasionally, Sarah shifted on her heels, looking away whenever she caught Keanu's eye. Eventually, Greg tallied the total, clearing his throat as if forcing down his pride. It's enough, he acknowledged, pushing back the pile. He lifted the necklace. Would you like it wrapped? He asked. Yes, please, Noah said, blinking rapidly. Another short grunt escaped him, an involuntary vocal tick, but for once, he didn't feel the need to hide or apologize for it. The hush in the store was still thick, but now it carried a different air, a collective sense that something important had just taken place. Even the older man who had jeered earlier stood quietly by, occasionally darting a glance at Keanu and then at the camera phones pointing in their direction. Greg wrapped the necklace with forced precision, slipping it into a small box and tying a neat ribbon. He handed it over to Noah with a stiff arm. There you go, he said in a monotone voice. The boy reached out with trembling hands, ignoring the last few ticks rattling his shoulders. This was the moment he'd worked for, his mother's present. Keanu offered a warm smile. Looks like you got what you came for, he said gently. Noah nodded, hugging the tiny wrap box to his chest. He mumbled a shaky, thank you, though it was unclear if he was thanking Greg, the store, or the kind actor by his side. Likely all three, in different ways. But Sarah Stanton's voice cut in before the relief could settle. Wait, she said sharply. Everyone froze. She took a step toward the pair. Her expression was unreadable, a storm of embarrassment, anger, and concern about the store's reputation. Mr. Reeves, she said, tried to adopt a polite tone. I hope you realize there was no intention to offend or discriminate here. It was a misunderstanding, that's all. Keanu regarded her with measured calm. A misunderstanding is forgetting the price. What happened here was mocking a boy for having Tourette's and paying in coins. His words were measured, and Sarah's face flushed. She looked to Greg for backup, but he avoided her gaze. We regret it, Sarah said. Then she forced a bright smile toward Noah. Truly, we're sorry for any inconvenience. Enjoy the necklace. The words felt hollow, but she seemed desperate to salvage some semblance of dignity. Noah, feeling his confidence waver, just nodded. He wanted to run out the door, away from these scrutinizing eyes. Keanu noticed the boy's agitation and placed a gentle hand on his back, guiding him toward the exit. The tension was palpable as they crossed the threshold. The door chimed once more, and they stepped out into the crisp air, leaving stunned customers and anxious store employees behind. Outside, a small cluster of onlookers had formed. A couple of them recognized Keanu immediately, their faces lighting up with excitement. But he simply held up a polite hand, signaling he wasn't in the mood to sign autographs or chat. Instead, he leaned down to Noah, whose shoulders jerked in a final barrage of ticks. You okay? He asked quietly. The boy nodded, tears brimming at the corners of his eyes. I can't believe what just happened. He admitted in a whisper. I thought I was just going to buy the necklace and go. I never wanted all that. Keanu's expression was soft. Sometimes people show us who they really are without warning. Don't let that stop you from living your life, all right? He paused, then added, You have nothing to be ashamed of. Noah looked down at the small box in his hands. The reason he'd braved the store in the first place. Images of his mom's smile flashed in his mind, and that single thought made the entire ordeal worth it. Thank you, he said to Keanu, for everything. A slight grin tugged at the actor's lips. I didn't do much. You did all the hard work, saving that money and standing up for yourself. Another wave of ticks fluttered through Noah. But this time he didn't avert his gaze or try to hide. He simply accepted it, letting the moment of kindness fill him with renewed confidence. Keanu walked with him down the block. Light drizzle began to fall, a cool mist glinting under the streetlights. Noah clutched the necklace box in one hand, the old wooden savings box in the other. For the first time in a very long day, he felt an odd mixture of relief and triumph. A few steps later, Keanu stopped at the corner. "I'm about somewhere I need to be," he said gently. "But I'm proud of you, kid. You did good." Noah's voice trembled. "It means a lot that you stood up for me." Keanu reached out and briefly squeezed his shoulder. "You're worth standing up for," he replied simply, then lifted his collar against the drizzle and disappeared into the city crowd. Noah watched him go, heart pounding with gratitude and awe at what he'd just experienced. Noah hurried home, weaving through the light evening traffic. The drizzle gathered momentum, but he hardly noticed. The rhythmic tap of rain against the sidewalk couldn't drown out the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. Every so often, a new tick jolted his shoulders or forced a quick series of blinks, yet a deep sense of purpose kept his steps steady. He clutched the small gift box with a necklace so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He imagined his mother's reaction. Emma rarely received gifts, given their financial struggles. She'd been the sole provider, working long hours at a hotel to make ends meet. Over the years, she had put Noah's needs first, his medications, school supplies, therapy sessions, always letting her own wants fall by the wayside. More than once, she had patched the same pair of shoes or worn the same coat to avoid extra expenses. The thought that he could finally give her a token of love brought a glowing warmth to his chest. Still, the memory of Sarah Stanton's mocking laugh echoed in his mind. He could picture her perfectly groomed hair and narrowed eyes, the way she treated him like he wasn't even worthy of a greeting. Greg Carter's disdainful sneer flashed through his thoughts, too. Noah bristled. But then he remembered Keanu Reeves calmly pushing back, insisting that Noah be treated with the same dignity as any paying customer. Approaching the front porch of his small house, Noah wiped rainwater from his face. The porch light illuminated a scattering of fallen leaves, and through the living room window, he could see Emma moving about, likely preparing a late dinner. He paused at the threshold, nerves fluttering in his stomach. After all the day's intensity, how would he even explain it to her? He opened the door quietly, stepping onto creaking floorboards. Emma rushed in from the kitchen, eyes widening with relief at the sight of him. "Noah, sweetheart, you're soaked," she exclaimed, rushing forward with a towel in hand. He barely managed to shuffle out of his wet hoodie before she began patting him dry. "I was starting to worry," she said. "I didn't expect you to be gone so long." Noah bit his lip, then smiled. I had something important to do." His words sounded small, overshadowed by a hesitant vocal tick, a sharp clicking noise. Emma glanced at him with gentle concern, but he simply set his backpack aside and reached into his pocket, retrieving the small jewelry box. "Mom, this is for you." Her brow furrowed in confusion as she noticed the tidy ribbon around the box. When she carefully opened it, her expression melted into sheer disbelief. The silver heart pendant glinted under the light of the single overhead lamp, and Emma pressed a hand to her mouth. "Noah," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. How did you manage to?" He took a shaky breath, conscious of a twitch in his left cheek. He tried to hold it back, but eventually just let it happen. "I saved my money," he explained. "All the coins, all the small bills. And I bought it for you because I wanted you to have something special. You do so much for me, Mom. You deserve something beautiful." Emma's tears spilled over, and she flung her arms around him, pulling him into a tight hug. He buried his face in her shoulder, feeling her sobs shake both of them. Each muffled gasp reminded him why he had endured the humiliation at the store, to see this reaction of pure gratitude and love. "It's perfect," she managed, her voice trembling. "I can't believe you did this." Then, pulling back, she searched his face. "But you said you paid in coins? That jewelry store downtown is so expensive. Did everything go okay?" A flicker of concern darkened her expression. Noah hesitated, deciding how much to share. "It was rough," he admitted softly. "The woman behind the counter didn't like me using coins, and, well, my tics got worse because I was nervous. A few people laughed at me. Emma's eyes hardened with protectiveness. They laughed at you? Her voice was hushed but fierce. He nodded slowly, forging onward before she could vent her anger. But then Keanu Reeves showed up and stood up for me. The sentence sounded almost surreal. Emma blinked in confusion, and a faint smile tugged at her lips as if she thought he was joking. "The actor?" she asked. "That Keanu Reeves?" A small grin tugged at Noah's face. "Yeah, that Keanu Reeves," he said with a mix of pride and disbelief. "He basically told them off and made sure they sold me the necklace. He's the reason they counted out every last coin." Emma stared in astonishment. Then she gave him another fierce hug, as if she could make all the pain he'd endured vanish. "Oh, Noah, I'm so sorry they treated you badly." She held him at arm's length, her gaze softening. "But I'm so proud of you for saving up and doing this on your own. It means more than you'll ever know." Noah realized that in this single moment, seeing tears of happiness in his mother's eyes, every second of embarrassment and humiliation had been worth it. Emma slipped the necklace on, trembling fingers adjusting the heart pendant against her chest. She couldn't stop smiling, even as tears clung to her lashes. To Noah, it was the perfect ending to a day that had swung wildly between cruelty and unexpected compassion. News of the incident at Stanton and Carter Jewelers spread faster than any of them anticipated. A few customers had captured video on their phones, clips of Sarah Stanton mocking a boy with Tourette's, snippets of Greg Carter tossing coins across the counter. And then the moment Keanu Reeves stepped in to defend Noah. By the next morning, social media was buzzing with outraged comments and supportive messages for Noah. No one was more stunned by the uproar than Sarah and Greg themselves. They arrived at the store early, only to find local news vans parked outside, their cameras pointed at the entrance. A reporter cornered Greg on the sidewalk, microphone thrust forward. "Mr. Carter, is it true you refused to sell a necklace to a boy with Tourette's because he paid in change?" Greg muttered something about miscommunication, but the reporter didn't seem satisfied. Sarah snuck in through a side entrance, flinching whenever a flash went off. Inside, employees buzzed with gossip, anxiously discussing the potential fallout. She tried to reassert her authority, but an uncomfortable hush fell every time she approached. Nobody wanted to be the next face plastered across social media. For the first time, Sarah felt real fear for her job, sensing that the store's reputation, once built on exclusivity and high-end clientele, might be unraveling. Meanwhile, Noah had woken to find his phone flooded with messages, people praising him for his courage, fellow Tourette's sufferers thanking him for shedding light on their struggles, and curious strangers asking for more details. Emma had tears in her eyes again, seeing how many kind words poured in, balancing out the cruelty that had first colored the experience. Later that day, Keanu Reeves released a brief statement through his publicist. He didn't mention the store by name, but he spoke about the importance of treating everyone with dignity. It was enough to spark even more discussions online, with supporters rallying around the story. As hashtags trended and conversation multiplied, the central point was clear. Humiliating someone for a medical condition or how they pay is never acceptable. Greg Carter, scrambling to save face, drafted an official apology in the store's name. It acknowledged that Noah had been treated poorly and that the staff's behavior was out of line with company values. But for many, the statement felt hollow, too late and too polished. Videos of the incident had already framed a damning narrative, and public sympathy was wholeheartedly with Noah. By the week's end, rumors surfaced that Sarah Stanton might be fired. Some employees whispered that corporate executives were demanding she be dismissed to protect the brand. Others argued that Greg, too, should be removed. Both bristled under the scrutiny, each blaming the other for fueling the confrontation that day. The store, once serene and upscale, found itself in the crosshairs of a public relations nightmare, all because they deemed a boy paying with coins unworthy. In Noah's world, life began to shift in unexpected ways. People at school recognized him from the videos. Some approached him kindly, while others just stared, unsure what to say. He still had his Tourette's, of course, But the environment felt different. Teachers offered supportive smiles, and a few classmates even admitted they'd never realized how tough it could be to manage tics until seeing the viral clips. For Noah, having more people understand felt like a weight lifted. One afternoon, a package arrived at Noah's door. Inside was a note on expensive stationery, signed personally by Keanu Reeves. To Noah, it read, "Thank you for reminding the world that a big heart matters more than fancy appearances. Keep being you." With it came an item that made Noah gasp. A signed movie poster from one of Keanu's famous films. Emma watched as he carefully hung it on his bedroom wall, tears threatening the corners of her eyes once again. When Emma asked if the entire ordeal had been too overwhelming, Noah managed a gentle smile. "Mom, even when I thought I was." His mother reached over and touched the silver heart pendant resting against her collarbone. "You're never alone," she said softly. "You have me. And now you know there are good people out there, even famous ones, who have your back." Noah considered her words, remembering the hush of the jewelry store, the laughter that stung, and the calm voice of Keanu Reeves stepping in. "I do," he agreed. "And that's enough to keep me going." Emma nodded, smiling through the renewed mist in her eyes. In the end, the necklace sparkled as a symbol of resilience and hope, a testament that, no matter how the world might try to belittle someone, compassion can still shine through and illuminate a path forward. In the aftermath of everything, Noah found himself reflecting on how a single, ordinary act, buying a necklace for his mother, could spark such a significant reaction. One moment, he was just a boy with Tourette's, trying to spend his saved coins in a swanky jewelry store. The next, he was thrust into a public spotlight, championed by strangers from across the globe. For Noah, the real victory wasn't about going viral or receiving apologies. It was seeing his mom's eyes light up when she opened that little box, and knowing that kindness could bloom in even the harshest environments. Emma, wearing the silver heart necklace every day, took comfort in how this painful experience had brought her son unexpected allies. The cruelty of a store employee and manager was overshadowed by the empathy of the people who rallied around him, including an A-list actor with a gentle spirit. Keanu Reeves, by quietly intervening, became both a friend and a symbol of what it meant to use one's influence for good. Life didn't become magically perfect afterward. Noah still faced tics and the occasional insensitive comment. Yet he carried a newfound sense of assurance. Having witnessed how unfairness can be challenged and how one voice, no matter how small, can resonate powerfully when someone stands beside you. And that, above all else, reaffirmed Emma's belief that hope and love ultimately outshine prejudice, leaving a legacy that transcends coins and necklaces, reminding them both that every person deserves respect,